The Qatar Grand Prix was interesting to say the least. Maybe it wasn't quite as exciting as we thought it might be, but two teammates crashing on the first corner is always going to create some excitement, and let's be honest, if you were a team principal, you would be furious, and that's exactly what Mercedes were, having some rather choice words for their drivers. Now, we're not sure what's worse, crashing out of a race with your teammate or getting lapped by your teammate. Yep, Sergio's year is really going from bad to worse, and it doesn't look like Red Bull are particularly sympathetic towards the Mexican driver after yet another terrible race. Want to know what Mercedes had to say about its two drivers colliding, and is this the wake-up call that Hamilton needs? Also, what exactly did Red Bull have to say about Perez? We'll be honest, it's not looking good. The Qatar Grand Prix got off to an intriguing start as the threat of a mandatory 3-stop race came true, but not only would a huge amount of pit stops be taking place in the race, with the FIA announcing a maximum of 18 laps on one set of tyres being allowed during the Qatar Grand Prix due to safety concerns, Carlos Sainz would not start at all due to a fuel system leak on his Ferrari, and Nico Hülkenberg would receive a 10-second time penalty for later accidentally starting the race from Sainz's vacant P12 grid slot. Not a bad start to create a potentially epic race, but that was only the beginning of it all, as Lewis Hamilton, starting off on soft tyres, took advantage of starting on the cleaner side of the grid and having softer tyres to get a better start than Russell ahead of him, and had almost pulled alongside his teammate as they entered the first corner. It was at that moment that Russell veered towards Hamilton's line on the outside of the track, just about far enough in front to justify the maneuver. Hamilton would have been well advised to back out at that point, but sought to complete a pass around the outside, leaving Russell nowhere to go with Verstappen on his inside. Contact at this point was inevitable, and it was Hamilton that came off worse as he lost a wheel and spun into the gravel. But the pair collided, and the 7-time world champion was sent sliding backwards into the gravel with a tyre ripped off of his W14 in the process. Russell had damage of his own and pulled into the pits for some tyre changes and to assess the damage, swearing over the team radio after being spun around in the melee himself and relegated to the back of the field. Russell took to the team radio to shout, "Come on, what the hell? Come on guys, 2 races in a row," in reference to Hamilton pushing him wide at Suzuka just 2 weeks ago, while Hamilton took to the radio to say, "I've just got taken out by my teammate." With tension building in the Mercedes camp, it looks like there could be more to this, as Toto Wolff had to step in to calm George down and keep him racing. Whilst Wolff was not trackside, he has built himself a pit wall back at home and responded quickly to an incredibly frustrated Russell, who fell all the way to the bottom of the pack from P2 as a result of the collision with Hamilton. Russell said, "I'm fucking lost for words, honestly. I've seen the replays on the TV screen. Couldn't do anything, totally sandwiched." The race engineer replied, "Keep your head down, keep it in this race." To which Russell said, yeah, I know, just fucking lap 1. To which Toto Wolff then appeared on the radio to say, "Sure, let's race now, let's do the best out of it." Initially, Lewis Hamilton had blamed his teammates in the heat of the moment and even in the media room immediately after he had to retire, which we must say felt extremely offside from the media team, as Lewis should have gone into the Mercedes camp and seen the incident again before commenting on it, as it looked like he was not happy, when in fact after watching the replays he actually took to social media to say that it was indeed his fault. "I've watched the replay and it was 100% my fault and I take full responsibility," Hamilton posted. "Apologies to my team and to George." It was also good to see George back his teammates and not throw him to the wolves, as the young Brit had this to say. "The incident at turn 1 was absolutely not intentional from either myself or Lewis. Visibility is so difficult in these cars, and especially when you're racing. There are big blind spots and we both have so much respect for each other. We will make sure to come out of this stronger," said Russell. Let's be honest, George did fantastic to recover from where he was to a strong P4. On top of that, this is now 2 races in a row where Mercedes have had an incident, and we're not sure if it's because Toto Wolff is not in the paddock, but surely his deputies are more than capable of handling this situation. Well, clearly not, but let's not beat around the bush. Lewis Hamilton made a rookie error that cost Mercedes bags of points in the Qatar Grand Prix. While first place in the Drivers' Championship is all wrapped up, it really matters. Hamilton is fighting for P2 in the Drivers' Championship with Sergio Perez, while Toto Wolff is desperate to beat Ferrari in the Constructors' Championship. The fact of the matter is, Hamilton really didn't need to make this mistake, and it's had a rather large consequence for Mercedes, as they had both the better tyre strategy and the track position. At the very least, they would have held off the McLarens and had 2 podium finishes, but instead, Lewis made that error, and to be honest, it's one that you would expect a rookie to make when they see a chance of a first Grand Prix victory, not from a driver who has more than 100 wins to his name. Take a second to think about Hamilton's main rivals for the next 2 months, Sergio Perez and Ferrari. The Italian team had an empty car in the garage as Carlos Sainz recorded a did not start due to a fuel problem. Charles Leclerc was starting in P5 and Sergio Perez started in the pit lane due to a crash on Saturday. All of this means that Hamilton and Mercedes were likely to make a huge gain on Perez and Ferrari, until Hamilton crashed into Russell, that is. Look, Lewis Hamilton is a world champion for a reason, and he's been on Mercedes' case all season to improve, but this could well be the wake-up call that he needed to realize that he just needs a more measured approach to the season and just needs to see it out without any more silly errors. And Mercedes were clearly disappointed with Lewis having this to say. It was the worst possible thing that could happen. On lap 1 with George at the back and Lewis in the gravel, things didn't look brilliant, but to turn it around and outscore Ferrari on an afternoon was not something we could have hoped for 1 lap into the race. Lord continued by saying, "What might have been is clear to me. We were on the pace of the McLarens and it's a double podium that could have been today. We'll take what we got, but it could have been so much more." Mercedes were not the only ones with driver problems, as Red Bull have had their own issues, but this time it's not between their drivers, but rather their drivers are at opposite ends of the scale, with Perez having an absolute stinker of a race yet again. Perez was forced to start Sunday's race from the pit lane after Red Bull breached F1 regulations by effectively building a third car in the wake of extensive damage that he picked up in a 3-car collision on Saturday's sprint race. The Mexican driver battled his way up into the top 10, but was hit with a trio of 5-second time penalties for leaving the track multiple times and exceeding track limits. It meant that while he finished 9th on the road, Perez ended up being demoted back to 10th after the checkered flag. Something's clearly not right on that side of the garage of Red Bull, and with everyone wanting to jump into the Red Bull, the pressure is only mounting on Perez to perform. Well, I think we need to talk to Checo after the race here to understand what caused him to have the track limits issues. Horner told F1 TV, "It was a tough race for him, a very tough weekend, and we will continue to help him fully. He has our support, and we're trying to get him back on the level. Fortunately, Lewis did not score today, and Fernando did not score significantly, so he is still second in the Drivers' Championship, but he urgently needs to regain form."